Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anthony Moreno. Welcome to Fronteras, Changing America. Today, we discuss evaluations and grading in education. Joining us to learn more about this is Timothy Hand. He is Director of Assessment, Analysis, and Research with the Las Cruces Public Schools. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Now, I'd like to get an understanding of how the evaluation process is. If you could share with us the model and what exactly it means, the philosophy, and possibly break it down for our audience.
Absolutely, no problem. The model, which is administered by our public education department here within the state of New Mexico, has three primary components with which effectiveness is rated. And the primary component is increased student achievement. And then the secondary is there are observations that administrators within the schools go in and actually observe teaching and learning as it's happening. And then a third component is multiple measures, which is made up of teacher attendance and also student surveys.
So as far as the observation process, is that something different, or is that something that has kind of existed?
It's absolutely has existed, and the rubric that has been used has been widely disseminated, not only in the state of New Mexico, but is used throughout, and it has been a common practice for principals and administrators to come in and do walkthroughs within teachers' classrooms for some time now. It's just one component that is being added into the new evaluation system.
Okay, now the new evaluation system, tell me a little bit about the history of this evaluation system and where it really came from and how long it's been in existence in the state of New Mexico.
For sure. The big shift is actually using student assessment data in order to judge or evaluate a student's effectiveness within increasing student achievement. It is a brand new piece that has come in just this last year within the teacher evaluation model, and the founding philosophy from it and this model is very similar to what is used within the Measures of Effective Teaching project, which was put together by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and that's where the kind of the breakdown, with 50% being the student achievement piece, increasing student achievement, looking at the student scores, 35% being the evaluation, and then the other 15% being the multiple measures.
Okay, now as far as this whole process, it's measured throughout the entire year?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a 3x3 matrix of data, and I think if we focus in on that student achievement piece, that's really the piece that is new and is really, it's controversial. People talk a lot about it, and I think the shift there has been, does a student's test score or improving of a student's test score correlate with effective teaching? And so the way it is put together is the PED looks at a student's past history with their performance on their assessment. So to give you some context, for the standards-based assessment, the score is from 0 to 80. Okay? And then 40, if the student scores a 40, that shows proficiency. So if a student, let's take a 5th grader, for instance. In 3rd grade, if that student scores a 17, and then in 4th grade, that student scores a 19, okay? So the average of that is about 17, well, it's actually precisely 17. And so basically what happens is, now that student is in their 5th grade classroom, if they score above a 17, then that student overperformed or grew. If they score below a 17, then that shows some regression. And what the model is saying is that the difference, not necessarily the score of the student, but the difference and the growth in that score leads to effective teaching.
Now, how can you measure effective teaching when you may have different students each year in the classroom?
Absolutely. And what that happens, they have a 3x3 data matrix. So within the teacher evaluation system, so you have this group of kids, and let's take that one kid, for instance, that went 17, or we said 16 and then 19, or 18, 16 and then 19 with an average of 17. They will take the average growth within that classroom for that year for that teacher. But then also, they will take the previous 3 years of groups of students for that teacher. So if the teacher has been teaching, let's say that fifth grade teacher has been teaching for the last 3 years, the growth within each of those classrooms will be accounted and averaged into the model.
Wow, so I mean, this could vary each year depending on what type of class you have. So how does the department really have a basis of understanding of what to go by for this? I mean, what are they using as a set model?
Right, and those are the questions that do come about, and I want to be very clear that as the Las Cruces Public Schools, we take the position that we are a support structure within this teacher evaluation model. I'm doing my best to go and try to educate teachers, try to help them understand the model that has been implemented by PED. And specifically, the answer to that is what PED has said is by taking those 3 years worth of data as opposed to just looking at 1 year's worth of performance, that once you average it out over 3 years, that makes up for some of the discrepancies that can happen from year to year. Because if they only took the 1 year snapshot of a teacher and then just looked at those students and their performance for that 1 year, there's going to be more variation than if you look year after year after year. If that teacher consistently year after year after year, if their kids come into their classroom and their scores grow consistently, that's how an effective teacher is defined. Not necessarily just for that 1 year snapshot. So you've got your group of kids. You're the fifth grade teacher. You've got your group of kids. Those kids grew. But they're not just looking at that 1 year snapshot. They're actually looking at your kids this year, your kids the year before, and your kids the year before. So it's 3 years worth of data that comes into the analysis.
So it's the 3 years that's really important within this. Okay, I understand. Can you compare this a little bit to past evaluation systems, for example, No Child Left Behind?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's No Child Left Behind is really the context within which this shift is happening. So the premise of No Child Left Behind, let's go back to our scaled scores. Those scores we talked about from 0 to 40 to 80, 40 being proficient. The entire premise of No Child Left Behind is that by last May, all kids would be above 40. Okay, so that establishes one standard for every student. So if a student, say, is at a 33, that was considered not effective. If a student was at 12. Now, this growth model, what it says is that if we have a student that scores a 12, what is being expected of that student is that they get up to about a 14 or 15, not necessarily all the way up to the 40, which No Child Left Behind dictated. Because to be quite honest, the No Child Left Behind was last May supposed to be the deadline where everyone was suddenly proficient, and we simply didn't make it because the general overall assumption that there is one standard of achievement for all students has proved false.
Wow. So as far as this upcoming year, are there any new changes to this type of policy, or is it strictly going to be the same for the rest of this year?
Absolutely. For this upcoming year, it will still be the same metrics. It will be the 50% increasing student achievement, and then the 35% observations, and then 15% will be the multiple measures, which is teacher attendance. So it'll be the same. And we're seeing if there will be some consistency within the system. I mean, it was brand new, rolled out by PED this last school year, this 2013-2014 school year. So it was fresh. There's a lot of discussion about it. A lot of, and I think part of it is we don't fully understand all of the aspects of the model throughout. I mean, when I have personally taken on the charge to go to schools, and in order to talk through with their teachers and with their administrators, what is the philosophy behind this value-added model? What is the philosophy behind what PED has implemented as far as a teacher evaluation system? And it has been a positive experience, because I know that there is upheaval regarding the evaluation system, but I think teachers do value becoming more educated about it. And then whether or not they then determine that it's equitable or it's the right thing to do, I think it's easier to make that determination once you understand the pieces just a little bit better.
Okay, well, wish you good luck on spreading that understanding as we go about this. Our guest was Timothy Hand. He is Director of Assessment, Analysis, and Research with the Las Cruces Public Schools. We'll be right back. Hi, we're back. Here to give us a teacher's perspective of the new evaluation system is Keith Wukelich. He is a science teacher at Las Cruces High School. Keith, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting.
I'd like to start off with hearing a little bit about how this new evaluation system has perhaps changed the way you prepare for your classes.
For a lot of teachers, they're spending a lot more time figuring out how to put on the dog and pony show, because the administrators are going to be coming in 1 to 3 times throughout the year. And we have this whole checklist of very nebulous terms that the administrators are going to be looking for. A lot of this that is something that would be seen if the administrators were in our classroom every single day. However, they're not. They're going to be there for that 20, 30 minutes, once, twice, at most 3 times throughout the year. Some faculty are spending a lot of time trying to figure out how can they put together a lesson that's going to try and cover all those points. Some people realize that that's going to take away from the students' learning, so we are going to keep on teaching the way that we believe is going to be the most effective for our students, and hope that the grade comes out in the end. We know it does on the test scores and the learning that we see in our students over the year. So we're not going to, I should not say all of us, many of us teachers aren't going to let politicians tell us how we should be changing our teaching.
I see. Now, if you could share with us a little bit, how long have you been a teacher?
I've been teaching for 22 years.
22 years. Now, over that length of time, you've had numerous students, and every student is different, I would imagine.
Definitely.
So perhaps sometimes you may have to spend a long time reaching certain students or helping them along the way as far as learning the curriculum?
Well, and the reality is every single class is different too, because it's not just that individual student, but it's the dynamics within that classroom. So even, for instance, this year I teach the same basic class 6 times, and then I have 2 other classes. Every single class is a different experience. So the lesson plans are slightly tweaked for each class, as well as while the class is going on. There will be an ebb and flow.
You don't have much control about the dynamics of the class. I mean, do you? Because a lot of that's the students in general, wouldn't it be?
No, a teacher has a lot to say on that. I mean, we're not in complete control, obviously, but we set the standards at the beginning of the year. We have procedures that the students will follow. And as long as we have from A to Z for every day, for the most part, students are going to follow that. Don't get me wrong, we do have students who will get out of hand, students who are having dramatic issues outside of school. The number of students that we have who are on parole has greatly increased, as just one example. So not all of them are going to stay within the confines of what's acceptable and what isn't. So that definitely does take an adjustment on what's being taught in the classroom.
Is there any pressure dealing with the new evaluation system in regards to performance?
A lot of teachers are on the edge of the cliff. A lot of teachers who are incredible teachers are getting poor scores. And it's not because they're bad teachers, but because these very terms that are being asked for the administrators to look for, nobody can agree on what exactly they mean. As far as the test scores that we're talking about, it sounds like a great idea. And it is a good idea, actually seeing, is there a standardized test that students can perform at, which really levels the playing field. It's an excellent idea. The problem is, nobody can explain to us what those test grades are. I teach 10th grade science, primarily biology. Well, that's the only time they take that biology grade. So what are these other tests that are being taken? Are they taking 3 completely different tests? Well, then how are they correlating them? Because there really isn't a correlation between them. And nobody in the state can answer a lot of these vital questions. We're being graded, but it's behind the screen. The great Oz is hiding behind the screen and saying, just trust me, it will all work.
So, as a teacher, what would you like to see from officials in Santa Fe who are controlling this information?
Number one, I would like them to plan out a program, go ahead and figure out by talking to teachers, administrators, etc., find out what are the possible problems, fix as many of those as possible, and then implement the plan. Instead, what the state of New Mexico consistently does is say, here's this brand new plan, we'll tell you about it as the year goes on, and as information comes out, it changes. The grading scale changes. Everything about it changes.
Is there too much testing going on right now in your classrooms?
There's always been testing, and testing is an important part of education. The problem is, are they quality tests? The EOCs are not quality tests. The PARCC exam is not a quality test. Regardless of what you have heard, these are tests that have been thrown together at the last moment by a very small group of people, and they do not do a good job of covering the entire range of that class and making sure what is most important is tested most often, what is the cursory knowledge is lower down on it. We need to go back and make sure that we have quality tests. If we had quality tests, teachers would absolutely stand behind them. We want our students to learn. Our students are our future of our nation. We need them to succeed.
Now, the way things are going right now, is it just too early to find out if these tests are working, or can you tell right now that there's an issue with this?
We've already seen on the PARCC exam, the funny thing is we've completely switched over to it except for science because they don't have a science portion done, but they're still working on all aspects of the PARCC exam. One of the major issues is it flies in the face of tests that have been done of how people learn. One of the biggest problems is within the page, the students have to read on this portion, they have to adjust it on screen to be able to read all of it, then flip over to here, manipulate material here, manipulate material here, and type in their answer. Well, all of that moving around and all of these computer skills are testing those various things, not testing the student's understanding of the material.
Now, as far as your teaching goes, do you have to take away perhaps some certain things that you would do to reach out to your entire class in order to just get basic information out there for the students to know so they could just get through this testing process? Does it take the creativity out of the classroom is what I guess I'm curious.
It absolutely takes time out of the classroom because it's teaching students how to take these sorts of exams, and it's also the review days that are built in to help them make sure that they remember the material that might have been from 2-3 years ago, because it's not always what we're teaching at that point, unlike the tests in our classrooms. And a lot of people really focus on, well, it's only taking up 4 days here for this test, 3 days here for this test, but they're not looking at the interruptions to school that takes, plus those additional days of getting ready for it, plus the additional week of you were absent, come on in and make this up.
Keith, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Stay with us. When we come back, we'll talk about the politicalization of the teacher evaluation process. Hi, welcome back. Here to discuss the politicalization of education and teacher quality is Jane Asche. She is with the Las Cruces League of Women Voters. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I'd like to hear a little bit about the history. This is nothing new about politics and education and evaluating teachers. It's been around for quite some time, correct?
Yes, it definitely has. A little over a half a century. Starting back during the Cold War and the era of Sputnik, we began to have this national dialogue about how our schools are failing to produce the kind of graduates that we really need to create the scientific innovations, to protect the public safety, so that we maintain our position as a world leader. And so essentially every president from Lyndon Johnson on to Obama, on up to Obama, has had as a platform education issues and how the schools are going to be fixed. And as these dialogues have progressed, we have moved from a system where the control of public education has been primarily at the local and state level. And now there's federal funds being injected into education to help fix some of the problems, some of the perceived problems. And in return, of course, there are some vigorous standards that have been proposed all along the way to measure, are we doing things better? Are things improving? And I could elaborate a great detail about what happened, under each president, but we really have come to the point where the whole school accountability movement has been tremendously accelerated, and such marketplace ideas as school choice, testing, lots of testing of students and teachers in particular to see what their impact is on student learning has become a part of the federal mandate. And so more and more it encroaches upon decisions being made at the state and local level.
Now you've been following this for quite some time. You have a lot of experience in education. You're a lifelong educator and you have a doctorate in education. I was curious, you've also did research with the Education Committee of the League of Women Voters here in Greater Las Cruces. What exactly was some of the research that the League was focusing on in order to better understand this?
Well, for one thing, we were taking a look at what is going on in the public schools, and particularly we focused on the Las Cruces public schools. But we also are interested, and I'm affiliated with a number of education initiatives that look at the entire county. One of the things that was brought out in the late 90s by a very well-known expert in education philosophy, policy, and measurement, a man by the name of David Berliner, was that one thing that plays a huge role in education is poverty. That is the single factor that accounts for the greatest amount of variance in education outcomes. And in Doña Ana County, we've got 39.4%, or almost 40% of our children from age 18 on down, living in poverty. And this creates spatial problems and spatial barriers that have to be overcome for good student outcomes.
Now, what exactly do you mean by those barriers? I'd like to hear a little bit more about, if you can give us some examples.
Well, for instance, the first 3 years of life, 80% of a child's brain development has taken place. So it's tremendously important that mothers get good prenatal care, tremendously important that kids have good nutrition. These can all affect the developmental outcomes on the brain. And parents need to know how to read to their children or talk to their children, give them language experience each day, even just 20 minutes, if they're going to come to kindergarten ready to learn. So our teachers in Doña Ana County, I am convinced, are creating miracles every day in the school system. Our kids are doing better than you might even predict. But they need to have the entire community behind them, supporting them in the work that they are doing with these children to help them overcome these barriers that poverty can create.
So what else did the League find with the research that was going on?
Well, one of the things that we spent a great deal of time thinking about was whether there should be some use of test scores for evaluating teacher quality. And that's a very complex subject. And, we aren't totally opposed to that, nor I think you heard Tim say that all teachers think, most of them, that teacher accountability is important. But there are methods of collaborating and involving stakeholders, and particularly teachers, that have been used in other states and other localities to get teachers and the community involved in designing good evaluation systems that really meet the needs of the local district. And we really believe that that's a critical element.
Now, do you feel that this element is, through your findings, was just as time has gone by, less and less feedback from the public was gauged by public education officials?
Yes, I do think, in fact, that's what's happened. There's rigid application of certain standards without consulting educational professionals. And in addition, there's lots of model legislation that gets proposed that's designed by elected legislators at the state and national level, governors, business leaders who come together to make decisions about what model legislation ought to look like. And then these people who join, it's both Republicans and Democrats, organizations like ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is the largest developer of ed reform legislation. They come back to their states. They work hard to put in place these models for evaluation. And, you know, chief among some of these corporate interests that participate in ALEC is Pearson, a London-based company, which is the largest producer of education testing, prepackaged curriculum, education publications, and it begins to shape what happens in terms of evaluation models and systems that are mandated for local districts. And we believe that the local district needs to have some serious input into what an evaluation system would look like.
Well, I want to thank you very much for stopping by. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and it'll be very interesting to learn more about how this unfolds, and hopefully we can get some more information as we continue to cover it. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm Anthony Moreno. Thanks for joining us. This is Fronteras at Changing America.